He texted, "I lent my ex some money. Don't freak out, it's just temporary." I replied, "No problem, I trust you." Then I transferred every dollar from our joint account into my personal account and closed it. 3 minutes later, the message came. The one that told me my instincts hadn't betrayed me at all. His card had just been declined in the middle of dinner, and suddenly, the trust he thought he had became panic he couldn't hide. I'm 35 years old, and 2 months ago, I learned something that changed the way I see love forever. Trust your gut, even when your heart is begging you to stay quiet. My fiancé and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 7 months. We opened a joint account a year ago to save for our wedding and the life we were planning together. At the time, it felt like progress, like commitment, like the responsible thing couples do when they're serious. I was contributing about 60% of what went into that account. I earned more, and he always reassured me it didn't matter. "We're partners," he'd say. "What's yours is mine. What's mine is yours. We're building something together." The text came on a Wednesday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. I was standing in line for coffee between meetings when my phone buzzed. "Hey, babe. I lent my ex some money. Don't freak out. It's just temporary. She's going through a rough patch and needed help with rent. I used the joint account. Love you." I stared at the screen. His ex, the woman he dated for 2 years before me, the one he promised he hadn't spoken to in over a year, the one whose name still made his tone shift every time it slipped into conversation. I typed back, "No problem, I trust you." Then I opened my banking app. The joint account balance was $23,400. Wedding deposits, honeymoon savings, the beginning of our house fund. And there it was, a $5,000 withdrawal made earlier that morning at 9:23 a.m. Sitting there in that coffee shop, watching people laugh and scroll through their phones like nothing in the world was wrong, something inside me settled. Not anger. Clarity. Because this wasn't the first warning sign. It was just the first one that came with proof. And by the time he realized what I'd done, the truth was already louder than anything he could say. Before everything cracked open, my life with him felt ordinary in the best way. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. It doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly inside routines you trust. I'm 35. I work in project operations for a mid-sized logistics firm. It's not flashy, but it's solid. I'm organized, detail-oriented, the kind of woman people rely on when things need to be handled calmly and correctly. I've always been that way. I like structure. I like knowing where I stand. I like building towards something real. He was different, charismatic, charming in a way that made people feel instantly comfortable around him. He worked in sales, good at reading rooms, good at telling stories. He liked momentum, liked attention, liked being admired. When we met, that contrast felt complementary. I grounded him. He energized me. We met through mutual friends at a casual birthday dinner. He sat across from me, leaned in when I spoke, remembered small details. When he asked for my number, it felt natural, unforced. Our early months were easy. Weekend trips, shared playlists, long talks about the future that felt aligned enough not to question. After a year and a half, he proposed. Nothing extravagant. Just the two of us, a quiet moment, a ring he clearly put thought into. I said yes, without hesitation. Opening a joint account felt like the next logical step. We were planning a wedding, talking about a house, talking about children someday. Combining finances felt like trust in action. I contributed more because I earned more, and at the time, I didn't resent it. I believed partnership wasn't about keeping score. He told me I was safe with him, and I believed that too. There had been signs looking back, not dramatic ones, subtle shifts. He guarded his phone more closely than before. He took longer to respond to texts. Girls' nights became more frequent, less specific. Sometimes he came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, and when I asked, he laughed it off. "Probably someone at the bar," he'd say. 3 months earlier, he went to his high school reunion. He was unusually excited, bought a new outfit, spent extra time getting ready. He came home after 2 a.m, slightly drunk, oddly distant. When I asked how it went, he brushed it off. "Boring," he said. "Just the same people." The next morning, he was glued to his phone, smiling at messages he hid when I walked into the room. I told myself I was imagining things. 2 months ago, he started working late more often. His explanations were vague. "Busy," he'd say. "End of quarter stuff." I wanted to trust him. I chose trust, again and again, even when my instincts whispered otherwise. That text about lending money to his ex didn't come out of nowhere. It landed on a foundation that had already started to crack. And deep down, I think I knew it. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Once the idea entered my head that something was off, I couldn't push it back out again. It wasn't one single thing. It was the accumulation. The way patterns form when you finally stop dismissing them as coincidence. After the reunion, he became more careful with his phone. Not secretive in an obvious way, just intentional. Notifications silenced. Screen angled away from me. If I walked into the room, he'd lock it without thinking, muscle memory betraying him before his face could. I noticed how his mood shifted depending on who he was texting. Some messages made him smile softly, the kind of smile you don't perform. Others made him tense, defensive. When I asked who it was, he'd answer quickly, almost too quickly. Work. Group chat. Nothing important. And I let it go. I was planning a wedding, choosing venues, comparing caterers, picking colors, telling myself stress explained everything. But then came the late nights. At first, once a week, then twice, then so often that I stopped keeping track. He'd come home tired, distracted, sometimes smelling faintly of perfume or cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked, he'd shrug, probably from the bar. Maybe someone brushed past me. He never sounded worried when he said it, almost amused. Girls' nights appeared on the calendar with little notice, just something spontaneous. You know how they are. When I suggested joining him or making plans together, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Another time." I started feeling like a placeholder in my own relationship. Then there was the money. Small withdrawals at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. He always had an explanation. Work expenses, helping a friend, covering something until his next paycheck. I didn't interrogate him. We had a joint account. We were engaged. Trust was supposed to be the default. But my body reacted before my mind did. A tightness in my chest whenever I opened our banking app. A knot in my stomach when I saw his name light up my phone. I remembered something he'd said months earlier, almost joking. "You're lucky you don't have trust issues. That would make things complicated." At the time, I'd laughed. Now the word complicated felt like a warning. I began replaying moments I'd brushed aside. His defensiveness when I asked about his ex, the way he insisted they hadn't spoken in over a year, the way his tone still softened when her name came up, like it carried history he wasn't finished with. I didn't accuse him. I didn't snoop. I didn't confront him. I watched. And the more I watched, the more I realized how carefully he was managing what I saw. By the time that text arrived, the one about lending his ex money, it didn't feel like a shock. It felt like confirmation. Because people don't suddenly cross boundaries they respect. They cross the ones they've already been testing. And somewhere along the way, without ever saying it out loud, he had decided I wouldn't stop him, that I would trust him, that I would stay. He was wrong. The moment everything stopped being theoretical happened on a Wednesday afternoon, ordinary enough that it almost felt insulting. It was 2:47 p.m. I was standing in line at a coffee shop between meetings, half listening to the hum of conversation around me, half thinking about the vendor emails waiting in my inbox. My phone buzzed in my hand. His name lit up the screen. "Hey, babe, I lent my ex some money. Don't freak out. It's just temporary." I reread the message, slow this time, as if changing the pace might change the meaning. "I used the joint account. Love you." The world didn't tilt. My knees didn't buckle. No dramatic rush of anger came. Instead, there was a strange stillness, like everything inside me went quiet at once. His ex, the woman he dated for 2 years before me, the one he swore he hadn't spoken to in over a year, the one whose name still softened his voice whenever it slipped into conversation, no matter how casually he tried to mention her. I typed back, "No problem, I trust you." My hands didn't shake as I sent it. That surprised me. Then I opened my banking app. The joint account balance stared back at me. $23,400. Wedding deposits. Honeymoon savings. The beginning of a down payment fund we talked about like it was a promise. And there it was. A withdrawal of $5,000 made that morning at 9:23 a.m. I stood there in that coffee shop surrounded by people arguing over oat milk versus almond milk, watching the barista smile like the world was uncomplicated, and something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't anger. It was clarity. Because suddenly, all the half-explanations lined up. The late nights, the guarded phone, the sudden need for privacy, the way my instincts had been whispering while I'd been telling them to be quiet. I finished my coffee, walked back to my car, and sat there for a moment with my hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. Then I called the bank. A woman with a calm, practiced voice answered, "Thank you for calling. How can I help you today?" "I need to transfer all the funds from my joint account into my personal account," I said, "and then I need to close the joint account." There was a brief pause. "May I ask if both parties agree to this?" "I'm one of the account holders," I replied evenly. "I have the legal right to withdraw the funds." "Correct." "Yes," she said, "you do." "Then let's do it." It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to move $23,400 into my personal account. 15 minutes to close something I had believed symbolized our future. 15 minutes to protect myself in a way I hadn't realized I needed to. When the call ended, I felt steady. At 3:36 p.m., I texted him back. "Just handled some banking stuff. Hope your ex appreciates the loan." Then I went back to work like nothing had happened. At 7:18 p.m., my phone started vibrating nonstop, his name flashing over and over. I let it ring. Then the text came in, fast and frantic. "My card just got declined. Where is the money? Answer your phone. What did you do?" I waited until 7:45 p.m. before replying. "Oh, the joint account. I closed it. Figured if you're lending out our wedding money without talking to me first, maybe we shouldn't have a joint account. Don't worry, I've got my half covered." My phone rang immediately. I answered. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, panic cracking through his voice. And in that moment, listening to him unravel, I knew something irreversible had just begun. Not because I closed the account, but because he never asked if he'd crossed a line. He only cared that he'd lost access. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. My hands were still steady. That frightened me more than if they'd been shaking. It meant something in me had already decided this was necessary, even if my heart hadn't caught up yet. That night, I didn't go home right away. I drove around aimlessly, letting the city lights blur past the windshield, replaying the last few months in my head. Not to punish myself, but to understand how I'd ended up here. How I'd gone from planning table settings and guest lists to closing a joint account without a second thought. I kept asking myself the same question. When did I stop feeling safe? The answer came faster than I expected. Not today. Not when the card got declined. Not even when he admitted he'd used our wedding money without asking. It happened months ago, when I started explaining my discomfort instead of trusting it, when I let his defensiveness override my intuition, when I accepted reassurance instead of accountability. By the time I got home, it was after 9. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat on the edge of the couch and waited. At 9:30 p.m., the door opened. He walked in, stopped short when he saw the suitcases by the door. I'd packed them quickly, mechanically. Essentials only. Clothes, laptop, documents. The things you grab when you're not sure how long you'll be gone. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I am." "Please," he said, setting his keys down too carefully. "Let me explain." "Go ahead." He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. I recognized that posture. I'd seen it before, usually right before he told me why he was too tired or too stressed for us to spend time together. "Trevor didn't need money," he started, then corrected himself. "My ex didn't need money. I shouldn't have said that." I felt my stomach drop, not from shock, but from confirmation. "Stop," I said quietly. "Just stop." I sat across from him, my voice steady, even though my chest felt tight. I called her. His head snapped up. "You what?" "I called your ex, about an hour ago. I got her number from your cloud storage. We share that. Remember." The color drained from his face. "She was confused," I continued. "Didn't know what I was talking about. Said you two hadn't spoken in over a year. She even offered to have her girlfriend confirm it." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. "Then where's the money?" I asked. "If you didn't give it to her, where did it go?" He looked down at his hands. "I needed it for something else." "For what?" He didn't answer. "For another woman," I said softly. "Because that's what this is, isn't it?" That was when he broke. Real crying. The kind where your breathing turns jagged and your body gives up trying to stay composed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said between sobs. "What wasn't?" "I ran into someone at the reunion," he admitted. "An old friend. We started talking again. It just got complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Just say it." "I didn't cheat," he said quickly. "Not technically. We talked. We met up a few times. Nothing physical." I shook my head. I don't care about the semantics. You took $5,000 from our wedding fund for another woman. Whether you slept with her or not doesn't change the betrayal. He wiped his face. She needed help. Her business was failing. I wanted to help her, and I knew you'd say no. Of course I would have said no, I replied. That was our future, our wedding, our life. I stood up then, the exhaustion finally catching up with me. You know what the worst part is, I said. It's not even the money. It's that you've been lying to my face for months, making me feel crazy for noticing, gaslighting me into believing I was paranoid. I love you, he whispered. No, I said. You don't. People who love each other don't do this. I picked up my suitcases. I'm staying at a friend's place, I told him. Don't contact me unless it's through a lawyer. The engagement is off. Please, he said, standing up. Don't do this. You already did, I replied. I'm just finishing what you started. I walked out. He didn't try to stop me, and that hurt more than anything else. I thought leaving would bring immediate relief. Instead, it brought noise. By the time I reached my friend's place, my phone was already vibrating nonstop in my bag. I didn't look at it right away. I needed a few minutes to exist without managing anyone else's emotions. My friend didn't ask questions. She took one look at my face, helped me carry my suitcases inside, and made tea. Like this wasn't the first time she'd seen a woman arrive with her life folded into luggage. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from him. 17. Each one a different version of panic, anger, and pleading, compressed into a buzzing screen. There was also a voicemail from his mother, her voice tight and clipped, demanding I call her immediately to fix this mess. I didn't call. Instead, I called my lawyer. We'd worked together a few years earlier when I bought my condo, back when my life felt uncomplicated. She answered with the same calm voice I remembered, and I found myself gripping my phone like it was the only solid thing in the room. I need to know my rights, I said. My fiancé withdrew money from our joint account without my knowledge and gave it to another woman. I closed the account and moved the remaining funds. Now he's threatening legal action. There was a pause while she processed that. Did you contribute to the account? She asked. About 60%. And both your names were on it. Yes. Then you acted within your legal rights, she said. Joint accounts are tricky. Either party can access the full balance. It's not pretty, but it's legal. He can threaten all he wants. He won't win. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Then she asked practical questions. Was he on my lease? Did we share property? Was there anything else jointly titled that could complicate things? The answers were simple. The condo was mine. He'd moved in a year earlier, but his name was never added to anything official. That simplifies things, she said. Document everything. Texts, call logs, proof of where the money went. If he tries to flip this and claim you stole from him, you'll need evidence that he breached trust first. So that's what I did. For the next 2 days, I became meticulous. I took screenshots of the text where he admitted lending money to his ex. I saved my call log showing I'd contacted her. I kept her messages confirming she'd never received a cent and hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Then I remembered the location sharing feature we'd enabled for safety. I scrolled through it slowly, my stomach tightening with every unfamiliar address. Places he'd told me were late work nights, dinners with friends, errands that ran long. None of them matched. My friend watched me quietly from across the room. Finally, she said, "Have you checked his social media? Not the obvious stuff." I hadn't. I didn't want to. But something in her tone made me listen. Everyone has a private corner these days. A second account, a curated secret. It took some digging, but eventually I found it on his tablet, still logged into my cloud. A private account under a different name. 43 followers. Just enough to feel hidden. The pictures told the story without needing captions. Him with another woman at restaurants he'd claimed were work dinners. At an apartment I didn't recognize. Holding hands at a concert I thought he'd attended with coworkers. One photo stopped me cold. Finally happy again. Posted 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. While we were addressing wedding invitations. While I was emailing vendors and discussing seating charts. I downloaded everything, every photo, every timestamp. I sent copies to myself, then to my lawyer. That evening, he showed up at my friend's apartment. My friend answered the door, took one look at him, and said flatly, "She doesn't want to see you." "I need to talk to her," he said, voice strained. "Please." I stepped into the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked. "I need money," he said. "I can't cover my bills without access to the account." I almost laughed. "You should have thought about that before you gave $5,000 to another woman." "She's not my girlfriend," he said quickly. I held up my phone and showed him the screenshots from the private account. His face collapsed in real time. "You went through my things," he said weakly. "Your things that were backed up to my cloud," I replied. "Yes, I did, and I sent them to my lawyer." He started crying again, promising therapy, promising change, promising he'd end it and pay me back. "No," I said. "No what?" "No second chances, no reconciliation, no repayment. I don't want anything from you anymore." I stepped back and closed the door. For the first time since this began, the noise started to fade. But the consequences were only just beginning. The quiet after that confrontation was worse than the chaos that came before it. Once the door closed and his footsteps faded down the hallway, the apartment felt unnaturally still. My friend went back to the kitchen without a word, giving me space I didn't know how to ask for. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my lap, staring at nothing. That was when it hit me. Not the betrayal, not the money, not even the affair. The loss. 3 years of my life collapsed into silence. The future I'd been planning so carefully, the wedding details saved in folders, the conversations about children someday, the image of growing old beside someone I trusted. All of it evaporated in a matter of days. And for the first time since this began, I let myself feel it. I cried until my chest ached. Not the dramatic kind of crying people imagine after a breakup. This was quieter, heavier, the kind that settles deep in your bones and makes you feel hollow afterward. I cried for the woman I'd been when I said yes to the proposal without hesitation, for the version of me who believed trust was enough to protect her. I cried because part of me still missed him, and that made me angry with myself. How could I miss someone who lied to my face for months, someone who took money meant for our future and gave it to another woman, someone who watched me plan a wedding while he was building a second life behind my back? But emotions don't follow logic, they follow attachment, habit, hope. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, memories surfaced. Him laughing in the kitchen, him kissing my forehead when he thought I was asleep, him promising me I was safe with him. By morning, my body felt like it had been wrung out. That was when the messages started again. Not from him, from other people. Mutual friends reached out carefully, testing the ground. "Are you okay? He's really struggling. Maybe you should talk." His mother called twice, then 3 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she left a voicemail. "Marriage is about forgiveness," she said, her tone stern but pleading. "Everyone makes mistakes. You can't throw everything away over one bad decision." One bad decision. I replayed that message over and over, feeling something inside me fracture further. It wasn't one decision. It was months of choices. Months of lying. Months of making me doubt my own instincts. Months of intimacy shared with someone else while I slept beside him believing we were building a life. I realized then how deeply alone I felt. Not just without him, but without the version of myself who used to trust easily. That afternoon, I took a walk by myself. No destination, just movement. I watched couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers, people laughing at outdoor cafes. Life going on, indifferent to my implosion. A thought crept in that scared me. What if this was it? What if I never trusted anyone like that again? What if protecting myself meant being alone? I sat on a bench and let that fear wash over me. Then another thought followed, quieter but steadier. What if being alone was better than being betrayed in slow motion? What if choosing myself didn't mean losing everything, but finally keeping something that mattered? That was my lowest point. Not when I found the photos, not when I closed the account, but when I had to sit with the truth that the man I loved never existed the way I believed he did. And yet somewhere in that darkness, something small began to form. Not hope, resolve. Because even at my lowest, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never beg someone to choose me again. The shift didn't arrive like a revelation. It came quietly, settling into me over the next few days as the noise around me began to lose its grip. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped rereading old messages, looking for a version of him that might still make sense. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head that I'd never get to have. Instead, I focused on what was in front of me, the practical things, the controllable things. I met with my lawyer again. She reviewed everything I'd sent, the texts, the banking records, the screenshots from his private account, the location history. She didn't look surprised. That alone was grounding. "You did the right thing," she said plainly. "You protected yourself before things escalated further." Hearing it out loud mattered more than I expected. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. His ex called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "I wanted you to hear this directly from me," she said, her voice steady, almost apologetic. "I haven't spoken to him in over a year. I didn't take any money from him, and I'm sorry you got dragged into this." I thanked her. We talked briefly, nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just clarity. When I hung up, the last trace of doubt dissolved. It had never been about confusion or misunderstanding. It had been about deception. That night, I sat alone and made a list, not of grievances, of truths. He chose to lie. He chose to take money meant for our future. He chose to protect himself over us. And I chose not to stay. That distinction mattered. A few days later, he tried again. A long message. Apologies layered with regret. Promises of therapy, of transparency, of becoming someone better. I read it once, then I archived it. Growth offered only after consequences isn't growth, it's panic. The real turning point came when I realized I wasn't waiting for his next move anymore. I wasn't bracing for confrontation. I wasn't hoping for closure from him. I already had it. I went back to my condo to collect the rest of my things. He wasn't there. The space felt different, lighter, like it had been holding its breath for months and finally exhaled. I packed methodically. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I noticed small things instead. The dent in the couch from where he used to sit, the empty drawer where his things had been, and for the first time, the absence felt like relief. That evening, I sent one final message. "This is over, please don't contact me again." He didn't respond. And that was okay, because the power had already shifted. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through clarity. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And once that happened, there was no version of this story where I went back. The aftermath didn't explode, it collapsed inward. Once I sent that final message, the world didn't stop. No dramatic apologies, no sudden public confession, just consequences arriving quietly, one by one, like bills that had been overdue for months. The first thing that fell apart was his story. He tried to control it at first, told people I had overreacted, that I'd taken money out of anger, that I'd blindsided him and made things legal when they didn't need to be. He painted himself as confused, hurt, abandoned. But stories only work when no one checks the facts. His ex confirmed, calmly and clearly, that she hadn't received a cent. Friends began comparing notes. Timelines didn't line up. The private account surfaced in whispers, then screenshots. The woman from the photos, the one he claimed was just a friend, suddenly had a name. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. People stopped asking me to reconsider. They stopped telling me to forgive. The messages changed tone, shorter, more careful. Some came with apologies attached. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that." His mother tried one last time. She called late one evening, her voice softer than before, exhaustion creeping in around the edges. "He's really struggling," she said. "He's lost a lot." I believed her, but I also knew he hadn't lost everything. He'd lost access. To my money, to my trust, to the version of me who smoothed things over so he wouldn't have to sit with discomfort. "I hope he gets help," I said honestly, "but I'm not coming back." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I understand," even though I wasn't sure she did. At work, my focus returned in pieces. I started sleeping through the night again. I noticed how much lighter my body felt without the constant background tension of suspicion. My appetite came back. My laugh did too, slowly, like it had to be convinced it was safe. He tried reaching out again 2 weeks later, not with apologies this time, but nostalgia. Photos, memories, a song we used to love. I didn't respond. That chapter was closed, not because I slammed it shut, but because there was nothing left inside it worth rereading. The financial fallout was swift. Without access to the joint account, he struggled. Bills piled up. He moved out of my condo after I formally requested it. It wasn't dramatic. Just boxes. A spare key left on the counter. Silence where arguments could have been. The wedding was canceled quietly. I emailed the vendors, returned what I could, let the rest go. I sent a brief message to the people who mattered most. "The wedding is off due to infidelity and breach of trust. Thank you for understanding." I didn't include details. I didn't need to. People filled in the blanks on their own. A month later, I heard through mutual friends that the woman from the private account had cut contact with him. Once things got real, once consequences followed him instead of me, once secrecy was no longer an option. That felt poetic in a way I didn't expect. Not satisfying, just fitting. I didn't celebrate his losses. I didn't feel triumphant. Mostly I felt tired, the kind of tired that comes from holding yourself together for too long. But underneath that exhaustion was something solid. Peace. I hadn't destroyed his life. I'd simply stepped out of the way and let his choices meet reality. And that was enough. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like empowerment at first. It felt like quiet. Quiet mornings where I didn't check my phone the second I woke up. Quiet evenings where I didn't brace myself for explanations, excuses, or that low-level anxiety I had mistaken for love. Quiet weekends where my time belonged to me again. I moved back fully into my condo after he left. I rearranged furniture, threw out things that no longer felt like mine, changed small details that made the space feel different. Not new, just honest. The money was still there, the savings, the future I'd been building. I decided not to rush into anything with it. No revenge spending, no impulsive decisions, just patience. For the first time in months, I trusted myself enough to wait. People asked if I regretted how I handled it, closing the account, leaving so decisively, not giving him another chance. The answer surprised even me. No, because for once, I didn't abandon myself to preserve a relationship. I didn't let guilt override instinct. I didn't let love become an excuse for disrespect. That text I sent him, "I trust you," was the last lie I ever told him. Closing the account 3 minutes later was the first honest thing I'd done in months. I learned something important from all of this. Trust isn't about ignoring red flags. It's about believing yourself when something feels wrong. Love doesn't require you to go numb, to shrink, to explain away behavior that breaks you slowly. And betrayal doesn't always look like a single moment. Sometimes it's a series of choices made while you're still setting the table for a future that only one of you believes in. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. I hope he learns. I hope he grows. But that growth doesn't need to include me. I'm not bitter. I'm awake. And I will never again build a future with someone who treats trust like something they can spend without asking. Because real partnership doesn't hide, doesn't take, doesn't deceive. It protects. And this time I protected myself.